We accidentally beat up a man. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, especially here, but life has a way of throwing you into the strangest situations. You can think everything is under control, that you've got it handled, but in a blink, your world can spiral into chaos. It all started on July 5th, 2022. That date will be forever etched into my mind. My grandmother died that morning. My father, mother, and grandfather were all running dangerously high fevers, 103, 102, 101 respectively. And me? I was sitting at 101 myself, but somehow I was the healthiest person in the family, which meant I had to hold everything together. Alone. I was the one who had to admit my grandfather into the hospital and handle my grandmother's last rites. It was surreal, handling everything in a fog of fever, grief, and confusion. By evening, I was physically and emotionally exhausted, drained from a day I wasn't prepared to handle. I called Samai, my best friend, someone who had always been there for me. He was out in Noida but said he'd be home in an hour. When he finally arrived around 8 p.m., he brought whiskey with him, knowing I'd need something to help me unwind. We sat down to talk, and I spilled everything. The deaths, the hospital, my fear of losing everyone. I didn't know how to stop it, and through it all, I was running a fever that had me seeing stars. That's when Samai, in his own Samai way, brought up the evil eye. He said maybe all of this was happening because of something we'd crossed. Maybe my family had been cursed. At first, I thought it was just the alcohol talking. But then I remembered that my parents had crossed paths with an Agori Baba a few days earlier while they were out exploring some new part of the city. Something clicked. I wasn't sure if I believed in curses, but with everything going wrong, I was willing to consider anything. Samay and I made a snap decision. We would go find this Agori and get some answers. It seemed crazy. So did everything else. We packed bags that night. I was ready for a 5-day trip, fever and all. The next morning, July 6th, Samai pulled up in his car, an MG Hector. We hit the road, heading toward the area where my parents had encountered the Agori. I remember thinking that the day had already started weird, but it only got stranger from there. Within the first few hours, we saw no less than 5 truck accidents. At one point, we narrowly avoided our own accident by barely a centimeter. Dead animals littered the roadside, cows, dogs, cats. Something was wrong. It felt like the universe was sending us a sign. We pressed on. After 3 hours on the road, we both felt uneasy. Samai was looking pale, and when we checked, his fever had spiked to 100. Now we were both sick. We decided to stop for the night and booked a hotel. It was one of those generic roadside places, but it had a bar, and that was all we needed. We got some rest, and by evening, we were ready to face whatever came next. Beer cans in hand, we set out on the next leg of the trip. Samai didn't want to drive anymore, so I took over. The highway was quiet, and I was speeding, trying to shake the unsettling feeling in my gut. An hour in, we saw another accident. This time there was a forest nearby, but the driver was nowhere to be found. Just an eerie, burning oil lamp sitting by the wreckage. We looked around but found nothing. There was something off about the whole scene, so we didn't linger long. We drove the rest of the way to our destination in silence, booking another hotel when we arrived. I felt like we were being watched, but I chalked it up to exhaustion and fever. The evening of July 7th, we finally started looking for the Agori. We asked around, but no one seemed to know who or where he was. The locals shrugged us off. Tourists ignored us. We spent hours searching, but by nightfall, we still hadn't found anything. Defeated, we headed back to the hotel to drink and recover. That night, after another round of whiskey and dinner, Samai suggested we go looking for the Agori one last time. We weren't going to give up that easily. It was nearly midnight when we left the hotel, wandering through narrow streets and back alleys, trying to find any sign of this man who might hold the key to our suffering. Finally, we saw it. A dim, flickering light in the distance. As we approached, we realized it was the same burning oil lamp we'd seen earlier by the truck accident. This time, though, it was next to a small fire, and sitting by that fire was the Agori Baba. I don't know what I expected, maybe some kind of supernatural moment or deep wisdom. But when we confronted him, he was ordinary. Just a man. We explained everything to him, but he just smirked and muttered something about a sharp, whatever that meant. Samai lost it, he snapped. Maybe it was the fever, maybe the fear, or maybe it was just everything we'd been through. He lunged at the Agori and started hitting him. It was brutal. After a few punches and slaps, the Agori was begging for mercy, claiming he didn't know any mantras, he was just a fraud. Samai dragged him to a nearby sewer and shoved him in, the man stumbling off into the darkness, soaked and humiliated. We left the scene in silence, not sure what we had just done or what it meant. The next morning, July 8th, everything changed. My dad called to tell me that everyone in the family was fine. Their fevers had broken, and they were being discharged from the hospital. Relief flooded through me. We packed up our things and headed back home, the tension in the air lifting as we drove. We celebrated the good news with energy drinks, but there was still a lingering sense of unease. Had we really lifted some kind of curse, or had it all just been a series of coincidences? When we got home, I explained everything to my family. They were shocked, not just by what had happened, but by how far I'd gone to try and fix things. Samai became almost like family after that, always hanging around the house, drinking beers with my dad and me, like we were all part of some strange brotherhood. But the Agori? He disappeared. We never saw him again. We did get a few anonymous death threats afterward, but Samai and I weren't scared. We felt like we had faced something dark and come out the other side stronger. Looking back, I'm not sure if what we did was right or if any of it was even real. But it happened. Part of my story now. One thing's for sure. Life will never be the same after that fevered journey. I saw my mother doing this with her lover, and now I'm afraid to tell my father. This happened to me when I was 14 years old. I don't even know where to start, but here I go. You probably never think that such moments will happen to you. You hear about them. You may have even read some horror stories on Reddit, but when it comes to your life, it's a whole different story. It seems unreal, as if you are watching a scene from a movie that you can't pause or rewind. This is how I felt on the day my world fell apart. It all started like any other ordinary day. I'm a college student, nothing special. I have classes, assignments, and the usual stress that comes with juggling studies and life. But a few days ago, I woke up and just couldn't do it. You know, there are days when you feel out of sorts, as if you're too worn out to function properly. Yes, it was me. I decided to take a day off, skip a class, catch my breath, and maybe even take a little nap. Nothing special, right? So I got ready, went to campus as usual, but as soon as I got there, I couldn't bring myself to sit through the lecture. The thought of just going through the motions felt unbearable. Instead of going to class, I just sat outside, scrolling through my phone and thinking about nothing in particular. I had AirPods in my ears, the music was blasting, drowning out everything around me. I decided to go back home. Maybe you could tell Mom that I wasn't feeling well and just need to rest. That was the plan. Just harmless. The bus ride back went without incident. I was looking out the window, watching as the streets and houses blurred, lost in my thoughts. I didn't tell my mom that I was coming home. I thought it wasn't necessary. Why not? I live there, right? What needed to be prepared? When the bus dropped me off, I started walking home with my AirPods in, and the music turned up loud. The sun was shining, the breeze was pleasant, everything seemed normal. Until it changed. Our house is arranged in such a way that when you enter through the front door, you immediately see the living room. It's an open layout, so it's impossible to hide what's happening in this space. I have walked through this door 1,000 times, never thinking about it. But this time, everything was different. This time I saw something that I will never be able to forget. When I opened the door slowly as always, I glanced at the sofa. And here she is, my mom. But she was not alone. She was with someone else, doing what no child should ever see their parent doing. I won't go into details because, be honest, I don't want to relive it any more than I already have to. Let's say it etched itself into my memory in such a way that it will haunt me forever. I just saw everything. I saw how he does that with my mother. At the moment I saw them, I froze. Time has stopped. I didn't know what to do, what to say. My brain couldn't keep up with processing this. Before my mom could react, I turned around, walked out, and closed the door behind me. I sat on the front steps, my heart was racing, and my thoughts were in turmoil. I felt unwell, as if I had knots in my stomach, and my hands were trembling. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. After a few minutes, the door creaked, and my mom stepped outside. She looked panicked. Her face was pale, and her hands were trembling. At first, she didn't say anything. And to be honest, I didn't want her to say anything. I didn't want to hear any explanation she was about to give me, because I knew that whatever she said wouldn't change what I had seen. It wouldn't erase the image that is now etched in my memory. Finally, she spoke. She told me that the guy, whoever he was, left through the back door, as if that changed anything for the better. Then she began to explain, plead, ask. She said it was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again, and that I can't tell Dad about it. She said it would destroy everything, ruin our family. She was in despair, but I couldn't even look at her. I didn't know what to say, how to react. My own mother, to whom I had trusted my entire life, asked me to keep her secret, to lie to my dad who wasn't even in the state, who had no idea at all about what was happening. I sat there, silently, while she kept talking, her words blending into an indistinct noise in my ears. My mind was spinning. How could I have kept this to myself? How will I be able to look my father in the eyes again, knowing what I know? How can I even look at her the same way? It wasn't just some minor secret. It changed lives. I'm stuck in the middle of this. After what felt like forever, my mom finally stopped talking. She asked again if I'd keep quiet, if I'd protect her from the fallout. I just nodded. What else could I do? I didn't want to be the one to destroy my family, but at the same time, I didn't want to live with this burden. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of it all. The rest of the day was a blur. I locked myself in my room, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But no matter how hard I tried, couldn't wrap my head around it. Couldn't stop replaying the scene in my mind. I felt sick to my core, like everything I thought I knew about my family had been ripped apart in an instant. That night, my mom acted like everything was normal. She made dinner, asked how my day was. Like we hadn't just had the most messed up conversation of my life. I barely spoke, barely ate. I didn't know how to be around her anymore. Every time I looked at her, all I saw was betrayal. Days passed, and I still hadn't told my dad. He was still on his business trip, calling to check in like he always does. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. How could I? How do you tell your dad that his wife, the person he's trusted for decades, is cheating on him? I didn't want to break his heart, but at the same time, I didn't know how to live with the truth. Every phone call felt like a lie. Every word I said felt like I was betraying him just as much as she had. I've been carrying this secret for a while now, and it's eating me alive. I can't sleep. I can't focus on school. I feel like I'm drowning in guilt, anger, confusion, and sadness all at once. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should tell my dad or keep pretending like nothing happened. Either way, someone gets hurt. Either way, my family will never be the same again. And that's the part that scares me the most. So here I am, spilling my guts to strangers on the internet because I don't know where else to turn. Maybe someone out there has been through something similar. Maybe someone can tell me what the hell I'm supposed to do. All I know is that nothing will ever be the same. My life changed the moment I walked through that door, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to go back how things were before.